Well, it is a beautiful morning, especially after the Chiefs hang on for a 23-20 win over the Jets. We've got a lot to get to here this morning with Kansas U.S. Senator Roger Marshall on KCMO. And by the way, you might have seen him yesterday on Fox News earlier in the day, since we didn't have to worry about the Chiefs until last night. Good morning, Senator. Thanks for being here on KCMO.
Yeah, Pete, good morning. Those Chiefs kind of lost their focus last night. They jumped out in front. They lost their focus. Maybe they were thinking about going out with Taylor Swift after the game. I don't know what happened.
I don't know either. I mean, it really was a tightrope of a weekend between the Chiefs and then, of course, you guys avoiding that government shutdown at the last minute. So there was a lot going on, including the fact that at the end of last week, and we'll get into what happened over the weekend. But at the end of last week, it was so predictable. There was so much happening here in Kansas City. But the Kansas City Star, for 12 hours at least, their lead story was, they mask it as news, but it was really a hit piece on you and your commentary on federal employees ahead of the government shutdown, where you said, well, we all have to sacrifice. When you saw that headline from the Kansas City Star, what were you thinking after that conversation and the comments that you had given to them?
Well, Pete, I don't read the Kansas City Star like many of my friends, but my staff shared how the quote they took out of context. Look, when you know that you're doing a good job, that you're over the target when the Kansas City Star does a hit piece on you. And here's the situation. In D.C., I'm walking the votes. There's 7 reporters, all of them asking different questions. And the Kansas City Star grabs one quote from all the things I said. But this is what I was trying to say, is that, look, I do have concern for the federal employees. I do appreciate the work that they're doing. But if you work for the federal government, you know that 1 out of 5 years, about every 5 years, you're going to have some type of a government shutdown. But you always get paid. So basically you get a free vacation. So you're going to go home, not work, and they're going to pay you for it. Very seldom do they miss any paycheck. Sometimes it's 3 to 4 weeks late, but usually they don't miss a paycheck. They get a couple of weeks of vacation, and that's not fair. And by the way, I'm very frustrated in D.C. Only 1 out of 4 federal offices are the people back working in office. 3 out of 4 are working from home. And then I was starting to say, look, here's where the real sweat and tears is going on. Let's think about our union workers out there in Fairfax that are on strike right now. They're not going to get the back pay. They're suffering from Joe Biden's policies that because of electric cars, they're going to shut down that GM plant. So they missed the whole point. And by the way, we do have to be patriots. There is going to be pain. The biggest concern that I have for the future of your children and my grandchildren is this national debt. And then as I listen to Kansans, their biggest concern right now, they're numb to inflation, but their biggest concern is this open southern border. Mm-hmm. So when this legislation, when we do the same thing over and over, when we have another stopgap measurement that doesn't take care of the border, of course, I'm just furious up here.
Well, it's understandable. And, of course, over the weekend, the government shutdown was avoided. And all the drama was on the House side, of course, where Kevin McCarthy had to basically acquiesce to some Democrat demands because he had a handful of Republicans who were pushing back on him. And then the Senate passed it, 88-12 or something like that. So what do you make? I know you were on the Senate side, or are on the Senate side, of course, where there wasn't nearly as much drama. But you've been on the House side. You came from the 1st District in Kansas. So you know this process as well as anybody. What do you make of what took place over the weekend?
Well, here we are. So Sunday, it was an emergency. The government's going to shut down, but the government votes to give us 45 days till Thanksgiving to fix this. And what does the Senate do? The Senate's only going to have us in session 1 day out of the next 2 weeks. So here we're supposed to be working on passing these budgets one at a time, and they're going to do some nominations this week. So just remember, this is what the swamp wants. They want these omnibuses. They want these continuing resolutions. It allows them to, in the dark of night, to sneak more things, more bridges to nowhere into these budgets, as opposed to going through a process where we bring each one of these the appropriations buckets to the floor one at a time and make the committee members defend all the different pet projects they've got in it. So I couldn't be more frustrated. We're being set up to do the same thing at Thanksgiving. They'll do another stopgap measurement till Christmas, and they'll use those calendars against us.
But in fairness, I mean, Republicans under President Trump voted for multiple omnibus bills, right? Oh. So how does this end?
Oh, you're right. I'm blaming all leadership. I'm blaming leaderships the Speaker of the House. I'm blaming the leader of the Senate. I'm blaming the White House. Let's start off. The law requires the president submit a budget by the first Monday in February. Biden was a month late, and so was Trump, and so was Biden. So was Biden as well. So, that's why, tomorrow night I'm meeting with Mike Lee and Rick Scott and Ted Cruz and Eric Schmidt and Josh Hawley and some other people to say we're not even following our own laws up here when it comes to this budget process. We need some type of a stick. We need a stick to make a stick to that budget. And I've got one more point here, Pete. You know this. But what we're dealing with is 1/3 of the federal budget. We only get to vote on 1/3 of the federal budget. 2/3 of the federal budget is on autopilot and occurs regardless of what we do. Someday we're going to have to address that again. The greatest long-term threat to our national security, to the future of your children and my grandchildren, is this $33 trillion national debt. We borrowed $700 billion. Excuse me, we paid interest of $700 billion this year. $700 billion of interest paid by the United States government this year.
Well, though, that 2/3 includes things like Social Security, which has become, in many ways, the third rail of the nation's politics, and neither party wants to touch. So is it kind of like we're yelling into the clouds when no one's actually going to touch or wants to touch or address the 2/3?
Well, it's a good point. I think that Medicaid is probably the third rail that we can touch. That we have 7 million healthy American men out there between the ages of 25 and 45 that are not working because we're paying them more to stay at home than to go to work. I came to D.C. to protect Social Security, Medicare, to keep them solvent. What we can't do is add more people at a younger age to Medicare. We can't, make it easier to get on Medicare, Social Security because of disabilities. There's some things we can do to make those better as well. And I'm going to go back to a strong economy. Mm-hmm. If you want me to save Medicare and Social Security, a strong economy is a rising tide that lifts all boats there as well. So I think we can work on that in it as well. But we need to do some drastic changes up here. There's no doubt. It'll probably take a second-term president that's willing to take on that particular challenge.
Mm-hmm. That is true. Roger Marshall's on KCMO. So now this resolution that you are putting forward, declaring the southern border crisis an invasion. Yeah. What does that accomplish that is noticeable if it were to get through to Kansas? What does it do?
Well, it would allow Texas and Arizona governors to fight back and hopefully control their own border. So we have Joe Biden right now fighting against what Texas is trying to do. Let's take the buoys. I'm sure everyone's seen these pictures of these buoys out there in the Rio Grande River. And I've been down there. I've seen them myself, and they're somewhat effective. But it just feels like the federal government is tying the hands of Governor Abbott down there. So the Constitution says that if we declare this an invasion, it frees up those governors to basically do what they need to do to defend their own states as well. So if the White House isn't going to do their job, it frees up the governors to do their job.
Boy, that's going to be a tough sell, I imagine, to a Chuck Schumer-led Senate. So what do you have to give up to get that to happen?
Well, I realize it's going to be an uphill battle, but I think you try to give Governor Abbott some street credit up here and say that we're applauding you, that we're pushing back every sense we can. But I think where the real action is coming, I've said that I will not vote for any more stopgap measures unless we secure our border. So this is just one more leverage that I can use to put pressure on the White House. Joe Biden says that we have a good economy. Joe Biden says our border is secure. Joe Biden thinks that the majority of Americans want to fund Ukraine, but he's wrong. I spent the time on the telephone town halls the last 2 weeks. We've talked to literally, Pete, we've had 20,000 Kansans on these telephone town halls, and 75% of the people we surveyed do not want any more funding to Ukraine. So I think we got our priorities backwards up here. It's time that this White House recognize what the will of the people is. And by the way, November 2024 is getting closer.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that town hall. I didn't get the voicemail, but my wife, she goes, I got a voicemail from Roger Marshall. Well, it was, I say, why is the senator calling you? Well, it was your town hall voicemail. So don't worry, it's all good. But I know that tens of thousands of Kansans are tuning into those. We appreciate you doing those, Senator, and keep up the great work. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, Pete, thanks so much. And I'm looking for a really good Taylor Swift Travis Kelce jersey. If you see one, let me know.
Yeah, I'll be on the lookout, Senator. Have a great day.
I may give one to Fetterman to wear just to kind of spruce up his wardrobe.
Yeah, I'd rather see him in that than the hoodie and gym shorts look. I'm glad you guys are dressing like adults in D.C. these days. That's a good start.
Okay, Pete. Thanks
All right,
so much.
There you go. That is Roger Marshall on KCMO Talk Radio.